has turned what used to be a beacon of hope in America, public education, into a symbol of government failure. So data is critical, and we need to understand our weaknesses, but we had better understand our strengths first. Because if we fail to present a balanced view of our institutions, we too will end up being seen as a symbol of government failure, rather than for the important roles we actually play. K-12, we've allowed secretaries of education of both parties to characterize K-12 as a complete and total failure. To show the stupid PISA data, which is completely misrepresentative, and no one talks about the TIMSS data, which just came out, in which US states participated as countries, and Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina outperformed every European country, and Finland, which came in top on PISA, underperformed the US national average. No discussion of this in the press, because we're addicted to failure as a driver for improvement. Discussion of failure and threat produces a short-term blip in behavior followed by denial. That's what social psychologists have learned. We have to be very careful about the portrayal of those institutions. The real data is we've seen increases in calculus enrollment. In 1982, only half of American high school students took Algebra 1 and geometry. Most states now are requiring 3 or 4 years of mathematics. My state 4. We hope it will stay that way. What we haven't done is build bridges from the new strengths of high school advanced course taking into the freshman year of college. The institutions that have done that, South Texas College in the Rio Grande Valley, now has 12,084 high school students who are poor and middle performing enrolled in their regular college classes out of 31,000. Remediation has dropped from 40% to 16.1% in a decade, and the number of people transferring to four-year institutions in STEM-related areas is accelerating enormously. Long Beach City College and Long Beach ISD, fundamentally changing how we actually coordinate and articulate work across systems. This is going to be critical. Why is it hard? Because community colleges remember when they were part of K-12. They have a creation myth of separating from K-12. And whenever they talk about reconnecting, it activates in the genome some kind of immune response. All right? And we have to be very careful about this, because students all need some form of higher education, and we need to stop thinking of artificial barriers between high school and college. The 12th year needs to be an innovation zone. Look at the places that have early college high schools, massive dual and concurrent enrollment. We used to think, in most states still have legislation that only college-ready kids can do dual enrollment. It turns out to be the non-college-ready kids who are benefiting most from it. Right? So we need to re-examine policies that artificially limit students' progression to higher ed. Higher ed loves college readiness because it frames the problem as someone else's responsibility. The most creative act in American higher ed today in most places is blocking the upward flow of accountability and transparency. People are terrified of it, but we need to get past that and reconnect centrally to students moving through. Last piece of myth is that systems will solve the problem. This idea is so stunning that everyone has their 10 practices. For those of you who are organizational theorists, DiMaggio and Powell, neo-institutionalism, institutions don't actually optimize for quality. They optimize for legitimacy. That's why all police departments which are locally run look identical. Studies in the nanotechnology and biotech industries have shown that within 6 months of new innovative industries, they're structurally identical within 6 months, because that's driven by the VC and funding. They need to be perceived as legitimate. Did I hear the word MOOC? Literally, presidents are giving these idiots millions of dollars. They don't know what the hell it is. but they need a MOOC. So they want MOOC for poor kids. They want MOOCs for developmental education. It's amazing. This is optimizing for legitimacy, and it's what organizational theory projects. But systems are not going to solve this problem alone. Every study of minority student success and first-gen success, Kay McClenny's beautiful studies, SESI studies, NESI studies, SEN studies, my studies of interviews with 700 students, sophomores, more than half the successful candidates named an individual who they assign responsibility for their success. We're not going to produce a system that's person-free. The question, human interaction matters profoundly. We are the carriers of acculturative information, right? We are the translators. We are the ones who invite people into these fields. Yes, we can use technology more creatively, right? But we're not going to build a system that significantly reduces the number of people involved in this, because this is really a culturative process that involves people inviting people into our world. And it's hard to imagine that being automated without having devastating effects on the cultures that we're trying to bring people into. So now, design at scale. In Texas, largely out of fear of legislative action and being fed up with foundations that create the agenda for institutions, presidents got together and noticed that most of their strong people are working on short-term grants, and the purpose of those grants is set by outsiders, not by institutional strategy. So the 50 presidents of Texas community colleges got together with my center at UT, with the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, now with the legislature, it looks like it's going to be set, and agreed to redesign the core pathways from high school into college mathematics and into programs of study, block replacing the whole remedial enterprise that's largely failed students. So I want to talk a little about design at scale, what's involved, and where you, as the people on your campuses who are most associated with student success and advancement, need to move your work in the next phase of what we hope will be NSF work for scale. NSF rarely talks about systemic change. It got bitten politically about that. But most of the people who bit it are now dead, right? So it's time to bring back the real work that our government needs to do to build systems that work. We've been in a period of policy miniaturization, focusing on bad teachers, not teachers and administrators as a whole, focusing on schools that fail kids, not on the systems that created those schools. It's time to move from miniature policy to system policy once again. So Einstein, remember his great thing, that if you work on a hard problem, make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler? Right? And make sure by all means you're working on the right problem. So in the redesign of remediation, the right problem is the gateway courses. What are they gateways to? Rather than enrolling students in courses, students need to be part of coherent programs that they make based on best evidence that they have. So first, content. I have interviewed too many firemen, EMTs, interior designers who've completed everything except college algebra. California, 2 years ago, 35,000 students taking developmental ed courses for the 5th or greater number of times. One community college in Oregon had no openings in remedial math. All the sections were filled by people who failed it the year before. And what is it? College algebra. This is horrible. I was one of the guys who advocated for algebra for all. What we got was algebra forever for our students. I want to here now publicly apologize for this algebra 2 crap. Right? We need to make sure that the content of freshman courses is the right content for coherent programs of study. And that means that many of the students in soft STEM fields and in non-STEM fields should be taking statistics and real quantitative literacy courses that teach them the deep use of basic mathematical ideas. Unfortunately, about 11% of adult workers use algebra in their work, according to the new ONET studies. The most common use for algebra by American adults is helping their kids with their algebra homework. That's not a good enough reason to keep people out of EMT programs. But you can't change that on your campuses. This is the first thing about designing for scale. Some things can be dealt with at the campus level, but if you change this on your campus, how do you know that the institution down the road is going to accept it? Articulation, applicability rules, this has to happen at the state level, not at the campus level, reinforced by the national professional associations certifying the outcome standards. Otherwise, completion agenda will threaten access and quality, and we'll get contemporary math courses that should properly be called Our Friends the Numbers. That would be a betrayal, right, of our disciplinary identities. So the first thing is, now people assume I'm a flaming radical. Those of you who know me know I'm actually a fairly conservative person. I believe that when we mess around with deeply embedded structures of higher ed, there should be a very high bar for change. Reformers always believe the future will be better. Administrators know the future can be a lot worse. We have to be very careful when we muck around with deeply embedded structures. But by any standard, the bar has been met for re-examining the content. We can't let our entry programs be shaped more by the weight of history than by the actual mathematical and scientific needs of our programs of study and our economy and our society. But you can't do this alone. We have to do this through our state organizations and professional organizations. The second is structure. Long sequences of courses do not work for people today. If you look at remediation, this is a 1 million+ student database. 2/3 of all the students who take a developmental course pass it. They drop out between the courses because they're too long. In my studies for the Department of Defense, all these people are saying, yeah, I'm ready to retire when I finish this sequence. Right? We need acceleration, but you can't build new course sequences just on your own campus. This needs to be at the state level, and because so many students go to institutions in several states, if they're in certain urban areas, this needs to be nationally set by professional associations. We need to rethink content and legitimate course structures. The third big piece is delivery. Our students lead complex lives, and everyone is looking for a magic bullet, the silver bullet. I'm a Texan now, right? We believe in silver buckshot. Right? Everyone, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, picks on something, emporium, hybrid, praying that it will be the answer for their modularization. What we're actually seeing is that these systems help some people and hurt others. And we need to have a system in place with IR that allows us to get the right student in the right structure at the right time. And we have to give up on magic bullets. Most of us will need a diversity of modern technology-driven approaches. And that will be a failure unless we have the IR systems behind them that actually support student progress. Biggest area, and the most controversial, is student support. We have reviewed 29 student success programs and strategies. They're largely an accident of what the person who created them knew about. Most of them are driven by folklore, and most of them are run by people who have no faculty or high-end status on their campuses. So let's just go back historically and talk about what really needs to be changed. In the 1950s, when developmental ed, student learning centers came about, why did they come about? GI Bill and civil rights. The faculty were for vets and for civil rights in their personal lives, but overwhelmingly against civil rights and GI Bill in their institutional lives. Faculty thought that this would degrade the quality of their institutions. How could those returning vets integrate into our campuses? What happened was natural. We were speaking about a small population of students of color and returning guys in their mid-20s. The administration took responsibility for them. They built the first student learning centers in the basement of the administration building. And guess what? The faculty didn't say, if they're the student learning center, what the hell are we? Faculty was perfectly happy with all of this. Basically, give up responsibilities for student success. Now, we have a giant industry of student support with no real authority over much on their campuses. And our campuses actually look like America. Most of our access institutions have solved the democratization access problem, and we have one group of faculty teaching courses, and we have an equal-sized group of people trying to help students succeed in them. Think we got a problem here structurally? This is the time to ask, because of the completion agenda and changes in funding, how do we recenter responsibility for student success in the core of faculty work? And how do we articulate the work of student affairs professionals with real expertise in core faculty work? First 2 weeks on the campuses when we visit it shows up in Kay McClenny's work. The tutors are just waiting for people to show up. If you're 1 week behind in my math class, no student tutor is going to help you catch up. You're dead meat. The whole theory of this is incredibly stupid. It's time to rethink this. All the student support personnel should be in the classrooms of students on day one in mandatory orientations under the direction of the faculty responsible for the course content. That is going to be some political battle, but it's the core battle that has to take place. Next, the actual content of advising. We looked at it, traced it back to 19th century moral education in religious colleges. There's virtually no evidentiary base for it. So a little bit of what we're learning about real student problems. Student success has a bunch of problems students experience. It puts it into a 16-week course and teaches it to students just when they don't need it. What we now know from pico-economic modeling, George Ainsley's work, hyperbolic discounting, overwhelmingly students who start our colleges are positive they're going to succeed. If they're weak, the first thing that happens is they get hit by the pace of instruction. Oh my God, I've never had to do anything like this. No one's telling me exactly how to study. First homework assignment they get back. I got a C, like it's a lottery. Maybe if they take it back again, it'll be a B this time. No ability to calibrate. Right? As soon as that happens, students' confidence drops. And as soon as their confidence drops, they hedge their bets by increasing their work hours by 1 or 2 and their activities by 1 or 2. And you can map out the cycle of disengagement. So by the 5th week, depending on who they are culturally, they're either gone physically or gone mentally, still in class. The higher performing students come in with high motivation, but they've really sharp kids, but they don't know about higher ed life. So they're positive they're going to succeed. And then they have a big success, and they have a big success, and they work fewer hours, and then they realize, holy shit, this is the consequence I have now of going to a weak school and not really focusing on education. They now get how hard it's going to be to actually be an engineer or a doctor, and their confidence drops. And the research shows that the biggest predictor of withdrawal is a drop in confidence from whatever level you have, and they start questioning whether they made a good choice, whether they really belong in college. David Yeager's work about to be published based on 1,100 students in 29 colleges. The biggest single predictor of withdrawal for students in the first semester is questioning whether they made a good decision about participating in higher ed. So we now have an evidentiary base about student success. None of that appears in traditional student support. That is where the real engineering and demolition work is going to have to be. Who are all the people responsible for student success, and how do we reorganize them around students? Last, faculty. Right. If we're going to recenter responsibility for students in faculty roles, you should keep track of what my colleagues derisively call Treisman's second law of educational thermodynamics. It's the only law that can be quoted in mixed company. The second law says that you cannot scale activities that require increased output from busy people. Deep law of educational thermodynamics. If we're going to recenter responsibility for student success in the faculty, rather than pray that an NSF grant is going to fix the problem, we have to think deeply and structurally about the purpose of our institutions and how the mission of our institutions should drive our budgets. We have a moment to do that. People are cynical about higher ed's ability to change. Mark Udov said, as a chancellor, he said, being a chancellor of a university system is like being a caretaker in a cemetery. There are lots of people under you, but no one's listening. People forget that higher ed has changed enormously when national need required it. After World War II, we built the most amazing research enterprise on the planet. Right? We reconstructed higher ed around national need. The need today is driven by downward mobility. We need engines of education that allow people to improve their lives through hard work and effort, or our social contract will collapse. We will lose our international competitiveness over time. Jan Tinbergen, first Nobel Prize in economics, 1947, really mapped out the macroeconomic relations between education. It's not short-term, it's long-term. The country is calling upon us to make fundamental structural changes like we made in the 50s, and we can do it. And it's the people in this room and the people who've worked on these pilots who are the activists for change. We need to rethink what it means to work on our work in a silo separate from the real institution, and what it means to move it to the center of institutions. If we change from access to completion, if we retain the access role, everything else about our institutions will have to change. And our job is to ensure the integrity of content and disciplinary integrity in the midst of that change. Thank you.